welcome to the line again.
Thank you.
You've been with us before, Kathy. Why don't you, just for those who are listening, introduce yourself, tell us your name and the company, the organization that you're here with.
Yeah, it's great to be on the podcast again for the second time. Thanks for having me. So I'm Kathy Graul. I'm the Director of Public Affairs and Communications at Twin Metals, Minnesota.
Awesome. So last time we talked, just a little update. You guys were talking about the project that you were permitting. Can you just kind of refresh our memory on that project and what it is that you guys are doing there?
Yeah, so Twin Metals has proposed an underground mining project in northeast Minnesota at the very kind of tip of the Iron Range. And we proposed a project back in 2019, and it took us about 10 years to develop that particular project. It took us a long time because we wanted to put forward the right project for the region, one that would be environmentally responsible, that would be right for the location and the area, and one that would provide a lot of opportunity for the communities in the region. So that project was proposed in 2019. It's an underground mine. We would produce copper, nickel, cobalt, platinum group metals as well. So quite this different suite of metals that we have in our deposit. Yes, they're all available in the deposit that we have. So that was proposed back in 2019. We've had a couple of hurdles since then. We've had our leases taken away a couple of different times.
Really?
We've had a mineral withdrawal was enacted in northeast Minnesota as well. So that's essentially
a mineral withdrawal?
It's essentially a ban on copper nickel mining in the region, and so that was enacted over 250,000 acres of land in northeast Minnesota, including our project.
Maybe I shouldn't ask this question, but what is the purpose in enacting that ban on those things? Well,
the idea behind something like that, or at least from the people that propose that kind of ban, is that they want to protect the wilderness area. The thing is, the wilderness area is already extremely well protected. The boundary waters are highly protected by our environmental standards that we have in the state of Minnesota, and also federal standards as well. And there's it's called a buffer zone around the wilderness area, where there's a certain area where no mining is even allowed, or any kind of industrial activity is allowed in that buffer zone between the wilderness.
And you guys aren't proposing to go into that or anything?
No,
like that.
no. Yeah. So we're not going to be building a mine in that area or anywhere even close to the boundary waters. And so, the area is already well protected. We have a regulatory framework that ensures projects like ours meet incredibly high standards, and in fact they're even higher for that area of the state because of the proximity to the wilderness area. And so really, mining bans are they're unnecessary, and they're really harmful to communities because it's not just us. There were multiple companies that were impacted by this mining ban, and that prevents a lot of opportunity in the area.
Well, let's talk about that, because I'm curious from a standpoint, those restrictions and the oversight and the things that are there for Twin Metals and for what you guys are doing, do they exist in other parts of the world where they do mining?
Well, certainly in some countries. There are our neighbors up in Canada. They have a good regulatory system there. Certainly in Australia too. There are some places where there are very strong regulatory frameworks in place to make sure that mining doesn't negatively impact the environment.
Absolutely.
But there are also a lot of places in the world where that does not exist, where there are no environmental or labor standards, where child labor is used, where there is just no kind of attention paid to the impacts of a big operation like that.
Would you say, and I don't know, so that's why I'm asking, because you're the expert here, would you say that more than, I'm trying to figure out percentages for people to understand, what percentage, do we, as Americans, do we only get from those places that are extremely regulatory on it? Or is Twin Metals competing with countries that don't have those things? Are we competing with countries that have child labor, that have things that affect our environment in a negative way?
It's right. It was in 2022 that we hit an all-time high for our reliance on foreign sources of the critical minerals that we could be producing right here in Minnesota. And so that's a really big issue. We shouldn't be so reliant on other nations when we have these resources under the ground right here in Northeast Minnesota. And we have multiple companies that are proposing to develop those resources in a really responsible and sustainable way. I believe it's better for the environment overall if we are producing our own metals and manufacturing them into the final goods that they go into, whether it's a solar panel or a cell phone or a laptop, and doing all of that right here in America where we have the resources and the workforce.
Tell me what that does. You talked about the impact to the community, and those. Everybody is always concerned about a career and a livelihood, a good job, a good place to live. What is Twin Metals in what they're proposing? You mentioned that a couple of times. How is that going to affect your community and the society around?
Yeah, so we once operational, we would create 750 full-time jobs and another 1,500 spin-off jobs. But it's not just about the job creation. That's huge for a town like Ely, Minnesota, and Babbitt and the surrounding communities. That's huge. But beyond that, there is so much additional ripple effect throughout the state of Minnesota. We would infuse hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes and the royalties that we have to pay.
Hundreds of millions?
Hundreds of millions of dollars from our project. In addition to that, mining in Minnesota, the mining companies, they have to pay into what is called the School Trust Fund. And so that is a fund that helps distribute funding to K through 12 schools throughout the entire state. So literally, if you're in the metro area or you're in northern Minnesota, your kids that go to public schools, they benefit from mines. And that's really unique in Minnesota.
Well, I think that that is awesome, how that affects community and affects those around us. It affects our children, which I'm a firm believer in the next generation. I'm a firm believer in legacy and the future. And so I'm impressed with, I think a lot of people don't realize in the mining industry, the amount of grit that it takes to do what you guys do. You started in 2019. Like I was talking with our team on the way here, and they're like, what kind of investment is that and that level of time to be committed to something like that? And you don't even know if you're going to succeed. Like, right. I'm not trying to be discouraging, but it's like you're really pushing forward like that. I think people don't realize how much these organizations, there are profits involved, but there are also desires for national security, for investment in our country, in our people, all the way down to the K through 12 education, all the way through. And I also think that people don't realize we're in this race for AI right now. And all of these metals that you talked about, all of them are essential in that. And we don't really want to be dependent on foreign powers for that, because we really need to be in control of that to some extent to be able to protect our borders.
We do. And so AI data centers, all of that technology is so incredibly copper dependent. And people just don't really think about that on a daily basis. They want to be able to ask ChatGPT, what they should do next in their life, or ask it what to cook for dinner or whatever, and use that service, that kind of service that is so technology and copper dependent. But they don't think about all of the resources that go into it and all of the energy that goes into it too to power those types of facilities.
Well, and not only that, if you are wanting to drive an electric car, if you are wanting to use a cell phone, anything like that, the importance of that. I came up in the electrical trade, and a lot of the lighting that we use that is even above our heads right now uses rare earth metals.
That's right.
And so it's like we need to constantly be searching for those things. The crazy thing is we know where they are. And so you guys are going through this process. Talk to me a little bit about the grit that it takes and the process. I think a lot of Americans don't understand what is involved in getting a mine out of the ground.
Yeah, well, we've known about these resources since our leases first started in the 1960s, and so we've known about the resources for a long time. The technology to develop them in an economically sustainable way has more recently been developed. but it takes a long time to open a new mine in America today. It's an average of about 30 years between discovery of a deposit and actually getting a project started. And it shouldn't take quite that long.
You're getting ahead of my question. I was going to ask you, should it take that long? But
it shouldn't. We aren't looking for any shortcuts. We want to be held accountable. We want to put forward a project that's sustainable, that's environmentally responsible, because we care. Because we are Minnesotans. We live here, and we care about our communities, and we want our natural environment to be protected just like everyone else does. But it shouldn't take 30 years to develop a new mining project. I do think miners are some of the most patient individuals that I've ever met, because we think about the future in terms of future generations. That's just how you think when you're in mining, because this is such a long-term business, and you are developing materials, you're putting forward projects, you're doing something that is so essential to our society and to everyone in this country, that's how you have to think. Like, what is our legacy going to be for future generations?
How do the American people, how do Minnesotans help this process? What are some of the things that, those who might be listening that are like, well, how do I be involved? How do I affect this for positive change? Because it really is about caring about your community, your country, your environment. It's really caring about the world, honestly, in the way that you're investing in intelligently mining in a responsible way. So how do men and women get involved in that?
Yeah, I mean, the average Minnesotan can talk to their local elected officials about how important this is, to help kind of broaden the understanding about what we have available in Northeast Minnesota. Not many people know that we have the world's largest undeveloped deposit of copper, nickel, cobalt, and other metals in the world. So talking to, voicing your opinion to your elected officials, talking to your neighbors about it, it's an important it's a really important topic. It's just like, I liken it to kind of the agriculture sector, and people understand ag. They understand where their food comes from. They understand why farmers are important to America, because they feed us.
Yeah.
They sustain us, and in the same way, miners do that too.
100%.
Between farmers and miners, we're essentially sustaining the entire globe. So thinking about how we come to accept that, and come to accept, what goes into all of our consumption and all of the things that we use on a daily basis. Mining being a really key factor in that. I think is great. Engaging with groups like Ben in Our Backyard and other advocacy organizations that are out there, engaging with state regulators, engaging in the process. When we go through a regulatory process, there are multiple opportunities for public comments. That's another way to stay involved in these types of discussions. But really just being open to talking about where our stuff comes from, and trying to understand that better, I think is key.
Well, I would think, that's something that the world needs a lot more of, is being open to being able to have a conversation. And talking about these things, because a lot of us assume that we understand and we know. And I remember when I first started working with Better in Our Backyard, and I realized, this is the process. And I saw some pictures of a mine, and then I finished mine 30 years later when they closed and reclaimed it, and it was beautiful. It was amazing. So I think that's one of the things that is really important for people to realize, is how they can actually be involved in that process.
Yep.
Yeah. So, well, Kathy, I really appreciate what you and Square Metals is doing. I really appreciate you sitting down here and joining me again on the line.
Yeah.
I think these things really matter.
You do.
And I'm grateful for what you're doing. So,
awesome. Well, thank you for your time.